Chapter 1, it asks, how have recent historical events affected the course of research in organizational psychology? Give an example of an event and the resulting outcome. So, recent historical events have definitely impacted the field of Psych because it sparked a lot of groundbreaking research, and a lot more practical applications are coming out around the research that has been done, and the growth in the field is definitely a direct reflection of what is going around and on in the world around us. One major example I can think of and read in the book is about the rapid development of communications technology. So think the increased ability to pull everything up on your smartphone. So everything, email, everything from work can be held in your hand. And the growth of the internet and just things we can do on the internet in the last years. And there's definitely pros to this, such as increased productivity, more flexible work arrangements for people. They can work from home and not have to go into an office and they can basically be anywhere. A con is definitely that the lines between the work and non-work lives are definitely blurred and sometimes non-existent. So this has definitely helped the field of Psych because it has sparked research on this whole work non-work interface and how employees can separate these two lives. And there's been such an increase on employee self-care, so outside of work, like what activities can they do to cope with work and separate themselves from work, and how people detach from work, what works and does not work. For example, my interview for the job that I'm at now, one of the questions they asked me in my interview was, what do you do for self-care? Because they know that my job can get stressful. And so they want to make sure that I had already had self-care, that I was used to doing self-care before entering the job, so that I could continue to maintain and separate myself from that. So that's question 1. So question 2 comes from chapter 3, and it says, describe the socialization process for graduate students in your program. Is the program successful in socializing newcomers and creating job embeddedness? This one was hard for me to answer, just given the fact that I'm in the online program at Liberty University. So yes, I'm in a graduate program at Liberty University, but there's not a lot of social interaction with other students face to face. And so it's kind of up to me as the student to take the resources Liberty has given me for the socialization process, to act on the socialization process. For example, being an online school, everything, communication is online. So there's discussion boards and interactions using the discussion boards, or posting of your own forum if you have questions, need help and stuff. And I've definitely seen a lot of other students reach out like, hey, I'm not doing so great in this class. Is there anyone that we can, kind of study together or help support each other, tutor one another, all done over the phone. There's some people I think they've reached out to see who lives near them. I personally, just because of my job schedule outside of school, have not taken advantage of this. So for me, the socialization process for my graduate program, it's been more on me. I've definitely been given the resources for Liberty to reach out. I've definitely emailed professors and had conversations with professors. That's been very helpful. It's just very different than if I was actually on campus. And so I'm not even sure how residential graduate programs at Liberty do this. But I can only imagine that Liberty does a great job with the socialization process for graduate students, especially students who might have where they have to come out, even if the online programs where they have to come to Liberty for short periods of time. But I do not have to do any of those. So that's why that question was a little difficult for me to think about how to answer. My graduate program is definitely teaching me about the socialization process and the importance of socializing newcomers and creating job embeddedness. So that, I think, is done very well. But yeah, so that's my answer for question 2. So question 3 comes from chapter 4, and it asks, how can an organization reduce or prevent work-family conflict? And I think there's definitely a variety of ways, a number of different tactics an organization can utilize to help to reduce or prevent work-family conflict. And for me, the biggest way they can do that is it's all about the supervisor-employee relationship, and having a supportive supervisor makes such a difference. Having a supervisor that can understand, having a supervisor that can kind of role model how to balance the work non-work interface, and a supervisor just to be a mentor, especially for new employees who come in are still trying to figure out how this organization works. Other ways are taking time to get to know employees, especially in the socialization process for new employees. It also helps employees get an idea of how they can balance this in the future if they're struggling with it in the beginning, and then figure out what worked for other employees. So finding out their needs, and then also needs in scheduling. So having flexible scheduling, giving employees more control over their schedules, and the ability to kind of change and have input in when they're working and where they're working and what hours they're working. And then other things like family-friendly benefits and work-family policies, and these will definitely be special for different organizations and be different between organizations, and depending on the size of an organization and budget, what they can put into place. But better benefits for families will save organizations money in the long run. And it also appeals to people trying to find jobs, because if they see a job, it's the same at these two different organizations, and they notice that this one's got better benefits, they're most likely going to go with the organization with better benefits. So it might be more costly for organizations up front. That'll be more cost effective in the long run and save them money in the whole recruitment and hiring process, onboarding process, because that can get very expensive for organizations. And then lastly, encouraging self-care in employees, so telling them to, like, okay, you're not at work, turn your phone off, or you're on vacation, leave your phone at home, kind of thing. Like encouraging that separation between work and out of work lives. So like I said, there's a lot of things an organization can do, and they could even cater it to different employees, because one employee might have higher needs than another employee. So it's not cookie cutter, and it won't be the same for every business, every organization, but it's definitely needed to help with overall employee retention. So question 4 comes from chapter 5. It says, imagine you have been asked to develop a performance assessment program for employee development. What techniques could you use to adequately evaluate employee performance as comprehensively as possible? So thinking of Murphy's List, which we learned about in our textbook reading, what I would want to find out is that employee performing major tasks, both technical tasks and common tasks that are specific to that job? That would answer a big question about overall job performance. And then I would look at the interpersonal transaction of the employee. So that includes all written communication, oral communication, communication in a professional aspect, and then communication with like coworkers, a more informal aspect. What do all of those look like? And then I would see, is this employee engaging in any destructive and hazardous behaviors? And that one would be a little bit more obvious, hopefully, but there could be definitely behaviors going under the radar. But trying to figure that out. And then, is that employee a team player overall, and following through with tasks and promises, and bringing something to the team? And to do all this, I would meet with the employee, him or herself, and get a feedback on how he or she thinks they're doing, and then also asking other employees, or if this employee deals with customers, getting direct feedback from customers who have interacted with the employee. But it's not simple as just asking the employee, how are you doing? You have to look at it from a couple of different angles. And so if the employee works in retail, a good technique would be to ask customers in the store, like, hey, has this employee helped you? Have you been satisfied? Ask coworkers of the employee, like, is he a team player? Do you feel like you're having to pick up a lot of slack from this employee? And then asking, like, the employee's direct supervisor, like, what are your thoughts on this employee's performance? So getting a well-rounded view and perspective of the employee's performance would definitely help with evaluating employee performance as comprehensively as possible. So question 5 comes from chapter 6, and it asks, what are some possible common organizational constraints? How could they lead to counterproductive behaviors? So some possible organizational constraints include anything from, there's leadership, so the level of leadership, the quality of leadership, time, so how much time an organization has, or even an employee has, a supervisor has, money and assets in an organization, resources in an organization, what all they are able to provide and have, and scheduling, and schedules, work hours, the organization's overall business model and business practice, and then workplace culture, so what it's like to be an employee in an organization, what's the culture on the job. And all of these can lead to counterproductive behaviors, because counterproductive behaviors are usually caused when there's stress, frustration, and opportunity. So if an employee is heavily monitored, they're less likely to act on counterproductive behaviors. But an employee who's not heavily monitored and kind of self-monitored even could get away with a lot and would feel more apt to act on behaviors because it doesn't seem like there's as much reason they would get caught. So like the constraint of leadership could lead to abusive supervision. So if you have a bad supervisor who doesn't really value the employees underneath him or her, it could be abusive supervision and negative feedback, and just that would lower the workplace culture. And workplace culture can cause social undermining. So one employee might not want another employee to have a relationship or with the supervisor or another employee, and it just gets all complicated and they kind of sabotage one another. And then issues, so the constraint of scheduling can lead to issues with absenteeism, because an employee might be like, that schedule doesn't work for me, I'm not going to show up for work, or feel less like they have to show up for work, or but a lot of these, it depends on if they are counterproductive behavior stemming from the employee, so any issues the employee might be having going on out behind the scenes or outside of work, or issues that arise in work. So definitely these constraints could lead to counterproductive behaviors, because when frustration occurs in the workplace, it can either be controlled and lead to constructive behaviors, so like this happened, let's learn from it, or it's not controlled frustration, and that's what leads to counterproductive behaviors, and like theft, workplace violence, alcohol abuse, any substance abuse, lying, absenteeism. So there's a lot of different counterproductive behaviors, and then there's a lot of different constraints that can lead to these counterproductive behaviors. So that's it for question 5. And that wraps up my complete midterm oral assignment. I have enjoyed the course so far, and I am looking forward to the other half of the semester. Thank you.